Eddie, you might want to announce that you want to wait maybe 5 or 10 minutes for the rest of the DAP members to come in.
Okay. Good morning. Edward Schuster, the chair, DAP. We're gonna wait about another 5 or 10 minutes before everyone could show up. I know Mike sent a message. He said he had a meeting for 10 o'clock and he might be excused. There's 13 people on here, so Cristina Olan, Jay Ortiz, Sotomayor, Carlos, Jesus Rivera, Marsha Taylor, Rafael Maldonado, Mike. That might mean Mike Fuller, Patricia Skull, William Tobias. Is Gerson on there?
Not that I can see.
Miguel just came on, so you got this. Mike,
Look
are
at
you
you.
on there? Mike Fuller?
No, it's Mike Funk.
Oh, Mike Funk. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, we got Marsha, Toby, Mike Funk, Patricia Skull. I think Gerson, he's supposed to be on too. I'm not sure. Gerson, are you there?
I don't see him.
There's somebody there on a phone. I'm not sure who that is. You want to start it at 9:05, Miguel? It's like 9:02 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
3 more
We'll
minutes.
start at
see
9:00. We'll start at 9:05. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Christina put the announcement of the YouTube meeting that it's being live streamed so that can be shared.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9:05. Miguel, are you there? Are we in recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Welcome to the St. Croix DAP virtual meeting to discuss marine protected areas. We're gonna do a roll call, Miguel.
It's the date and the time.
Okay, it's 9:05, March 23rd, 2022.
Okay, so do you want to call on the DAP members first?
Call,
Yeah.
just read the names. ¿Quieres hacerlo, Gracie?
Yes, let me look for the. Okay, so I'm just going to read the list down the list. So Graciela Garcia Moliner, council staff. Cristina Olan, council staff. Leah Hay Rivera, council staff. Ed Schuster, DAP St. Croix chair. Miguel Rolón, council staff. Alida Ortiz, OA, Outreach and Education Advisory Panel chair. Carlos, is that, I assume it's Carlos Farchetti,
Farchete. Mhm.
council member. There is a Galaxy S9.
The
Do we
people
know?
on the phone can identify themselves later.
I have to redo the name, Gerson Martinez, for the record.
Hola. Jesus Rivera. Marsha Taylor. Things keep scrolling down. Maria Lopez, Regional Office. Mabel Maldonado. Liaison. Mike Font, right?
Yeah.
Patricia Skov. William Tobias. There is a 1727. And there is another Mike. Is that Mike Fuller?
I don't know. It seems like the same person.
Okay, and there is a 1727 that I don't recognize. And
That is
that's
Sarah Graciola.
okay. Good morning, Sarah. Okay, so that's who you have online right now.
Right. So Mike asked to be excused because he had a meeting for us conflicting at the same time. And Michelle Pugh, she's not there. Who else was a DAP member that's not present?
Diana is going to check the list that we have, and
Okay.
in the morning, she will tell us whether we have a quorum or not.
Okay.
Let me briefly introduce the meeting. I asked Graciela to do it in case I couldn't be here, but everything is okay now. The three chairs requested the council to have a DAP meeting before the council meeting that is going to take place April 1920 this year. And the idea was for the chairs to expose all the members to the issues related to marine protected areas. So when the chairs present the reports to the council on April 1920, they will have the inputs, suggestions, comments from the DAP membership, just to make sure that we cover all bases. Yesterday, we held a meeting with the St. Thomas and John. Tomorrow, we are going to have the one from Puerto Rico. There are two presentations, actually maybe three, if Mabel can do it. We would like to repeat briefly what Graciela presented at the meeting on February 9th this year on marine reserve and the concept of connectivity, etc. This will be followed by Dr. Alida Ortiz on outreach and educational aspects of MPAs and how we can interact with the public and the needs for outreach and education that the DAP might identify at this time. Then we will ask, probably before that, before Alida, Mabel can tell us about the marine protected areas surrounding St. Croix. That was a presentation she gave to the council on the night. And then the last presentation will be that of the chair of the panel, Edward Schuster, and we then open it for discussion. All questions, please channel them through the chair, and then hold your questions after Graciela give her presentation. Then we will have a session of question and answer with Graciela, another one with Mabel, and then with Alida and the chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So you want it, Mabel's gonna go first?
The first one is Graciela.
Okay, Graciela.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my screen and the cursor. Can someone confirm that you are seeing the
Yeah, they're on.
Yes,
Yeah, I
we
can
are.
see it.
Okay, so what you're seeing, this is the same presentation that was given at the council at its 177th meeting. So what you're seeing here are the CFMC Mpas, the federal ones that we have specifically for St. Croix. It's the Land Bank area, that's a seasonally closed area, and the Mutton Snapper area southwest of St. Croix. Everything else that you see are all the other MPAs that have been identified. This doesn't encompass all of them, but it also indicates who the other participants in the protection of habitats is. We are not going to present anything on the connectivity among these MPAs, but we're just going to establish the reason why these MPAs were set up by the council in the first place. So just to give you a little bit of background, I mean, these are not seasonally closed protected areas are not new to fishery management in the US Caribbean. So just as an example, the amendment of 1990 actually closed an area south of St. Thomas for the protection specifically of the red hind, and that's what the Land Bank area also protects, the spawning aggregation of the red hind between December and February of every year. At the time, also the year that could harvest red hind was prohibited, therefore adding additional protection to these areas. So as I said, this is not new management in the area, but the council has been aware of the request of the DAPS and the and other stakeholders to evaluate the efficacy of these MPAs. So to continue, these most of these areas were identified with the help of the commercial fishers or recreational fishers or other stakeholders at the time when they were first implemented, as well as the period of time when they were closed to all fishing for the protection of the spawning aggregation. And in fact, the, oops, oh, okay. And in fact, the original identification of these spawning aggregations came from a paper of Olsen and Laplace, Joe Laplace, a commercial fisherman from St. Croix, from St. Thomas, dating to 1978 or so. So we do have in all of the FMPs the objectives that are supposed to be met by managing fisheries in general, but also specifically the objectives of closing off areas for the protection of the spawning stock. So that's number 2A here, that looks to ensure the adequate spawning and recruitment to replenish the population. So those are the specific objectives and the reasons why these management areas were set up in the first place. Additionally, because of the changes in the management strategy from the looking at single species throughout the US Caribbean to what we have now, which is the island-based fishery management. In this case, the example that I have on the screen is for St. Thomas, but you do have the same for St. Croix. They have been approved by the council. They're awaiting implementation of the new island-based FMPs. So they do have also specific goals and objectives in terms of the protection of the fisheries, to maintain sustainable fisheries. And one of the things that, of the goals is to foster collaboration among the territorial and federal authorities. And one of the things that the council is doing is looking at all the MPAs that are in place, and that's Mabel will probably tell us a little bit more about that. But there are other participants like the Department of Interior, National Park Service, etc., that also need to be brought into the picture. The most recent development is the development of the fishery ecosystem plan that already has been presented, at least the outline and the draft goals and objectives to the council. It's that it also looks at the ecosystem. So these areas that are protected are not only protecting that spawning aggregation of red hind, for example, or mutton snapper in the case of St. Croix, which is the only spawning aggregation of mutton that is being protected in terms of the area where it's supposed to take place. The idea is to also look at the fish community in these areas. What else is being protected? What are the benefits of having these protected areas? Or in some cases, could they be maintained? Should there be more MPAs put in place? So what other recommendations will come out of these assessments? So specifically in St. Croix, you have the Lang Bank area, which is completely federal area established in 1993, and a year-round protection of the habitat, which came in 2005 by prohibiting the use of any bottom tending gear. The mutton snapper area, it's a shared area between the federal and the state government. It was established first in 1993 with a little bit of different changes in the site and the size of the protected area, specifically for mutton snapper, but by prohibiting all fishing, you protect anything else that it's there between March and June each year. Again, in 2005, that bottom tending gear prohibition came into being, and therefore you protect the habitat where these aggregations are supposed to take place. So most of these areas that are protected are areas that are in deeper water. So that's a bottom at about 50 meters in Lang Bank. This is the mutton snapper area on the southwest, a picture of that area, and here's some participated in that project. There are also the ones on the west coast of Puerto Rico, and then the Hind Bank in St. Thomas right over there. The importance of this map is that we're trying to figure out the depth related to the surveys and the research that can be conducted. So everything that you see in light blue, it's less than 30 meters, less than about 100 feet. Everything that you see in yellow, it's between 30 and 50 meters, and everything that you see in red, it's between 50 and 100 meters, all areas that could potentially have coral bottoms, sponge bottoms, or have areas of other aggregations, fish aggregations. So the other thing that the council has to deal with is the description of essential fish habitat, which means not only the habitat at the bottom, but also the waters that are over these areas that are protected. So by definition, EFH, then it's the waters and substrates necessary to fish for spawning, breeding, feeding, or growth to maturity. And this comes to us by law. And in all of the FMPs, most recent FMPs, but the council had also described habitat back in the 1990s for many of the species. It has to be done, and it's included in the island-based FMP, describing specifically those EFH essential fish habitats for St. Croix. So one of the issues that the council has been dealing with has to do with where do the fish larvae go, and that it's something that was presented at the council, but we won't be specifically speaking to that here. But just to point out that there is some evidence that some of the spawning that takes place in St. Croix, it appears that the currents move the larvae off to the southwestern part of Puerto Rico. So these are issues that we also have to deal with in terms of the spawning aggregation. So if they spawn in St. Croix, where do they recruit back to St. Croix, or are they recruiting to other places in the Caribbean? So that's what I have for you. That's what we presented at the council meeting. There are a number of research projects that are ongoing regarding these MPAs, but we will discuss those when we have an update on what is actually coming out of those projects. So, Mr. Chair, that's what I have right now. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Graciela. Any questions from the DAP members? Pat, I see your hand up. You could go ahead.
Yes, Graciela, I'm just curious about the Lying Bank area. It's closed for the Hind, and it's closed for the blackfin and yellow eye snapper, etc. But the other dates, it is open, isn't it?
Okay, so Lang Bank specifically is closed for the hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just that my microphone keeps turning off. So Lang Bank, it's specifically for the red hind. The other species that have a seasonal closure, the seasonal closure occurs in waters in the EEZ unless there is compatibility of regulations, which for the snappers there is none in St. Croix. So it would only happen off Lang Bank and off the southwest coast, beyond the mutton snapper area. And they occur at 2 different times, but the difference is that December, January, and February, there is no fishing whatsoever in Lang Bank.
I'm sorry, Graciela, is this just when you say no fishing during the Hind closure and Lying Bank, is that only in where the aggravation, where the spawning occurs, or is it just closed completely?
Okay, let me show you the map here a second. Let's use this one here. So that's the area of the Lang Bank that it's in the EEZ and where the red hind closure and the no fishing takes place between December, January, and February. Can you see my cursor there at the east end of Lang Bank? There. Does that answer your question, Pat?
No, Gracia, I can't. Okay, I see it now. Thank you. Yes, it does.
Okay.
I have a question. When you say no fishing in that area, you're talking about for the species, correct?
I'm talking about that there should be no one fishing in Lang Bank for any of the species, any of the reef fish species. There should be no lobster fishing, no conch fishing, no during December, January, and February.
In that area in the red.
Can you see my cursor when I point to it? Right
Yeah,
there.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, so right there, that's the Lang Bank area. And then there should be no traps, pots, nets in the area throughout the year. Then, so is that clear now?
I guess so.
This Mike Funk, does that include lionfish?
Does that include what? Lionfish. Is that what you ask?
Yes.
Well, actually, I don't know, but I think I saw Jocelyn D'Ambrosio come online.
Hi, Graciela. Yes,
Good
I'm
morning.
online. Can you hear me?
So there is there is no fishing December, January, February, but does that include not fishing for lionfish?
I am looking up the regulation now and can give you a response once I look it up. If I just raise my hand, is that okay once I've looked up the regulation just to confirm?
Definitely. So
Yeah,
so
that's
that's a really good question.
Graciela, from the table of applicable regulations, you have land banks and Croix, December 1st, February 28th. Fishing with pots, traps, bottom long line, gill nets, or trammel net is prohibited year around. So we have a closure from December 1st to February 28th to protect the red hind and other species, but year-round prohibitions are for those gear
Correct.
that are at the bottom. So again, to repeat, we have a closed season from December 1st to February 28th to protect the red hind, but we have year-round the prohibition to fish with pot traps, bottom long lines, gill nets, or trammel nets.
So St. Croix, already has the prohibition on the use of nets. So in this case, land bank specifically speaks to anything that actually will touch the bottom. So that regulation, prohibits all this gear year round at the land bank EEC MPA. Mr. Chair, I think you have both Jocelyn and Maria with their hands raised.
okay. Whoever came first.
Jocelyn first.
Jocelyn, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So I'm looking at the red hind spawning aggregation closure that's in the regulations it's 50 CFR 622.435. It says the area east of St. Croix, and that's, I believe, when we're talking about from December 1 to February 28th each year. It says fishing is prohibited, so that would be all fishing. So fishing for lionfish, fishing for species the council manages, fishing for species the council doesn't manage. It's just all fishing is prohibited in that area. And then Miguel did note the gear restrictions in that area that apply year round. So that's another layer. So for example, outside of the closed season, if you are fishing for lionfish with a pot trap or a bottom long line or a gill net or a trammel net, then that would be prohibited year round as well.
Thank you,
Any
Jocelyn.
questions for Jocelyn?
You have Maria now.
Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. This is Maria Lopez with NOAA Fisheries. I just wanted to say the same thing that Jocelyn was saying, and also just to remind you that this applies only in the federal portion of land bank, not the whole area, just that portion that Graciela noted in the map. Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Mike Funk. Again, you stated, what about using pole spears or spear gun for lionfish?
This is Maria. So it's during that specific time, the area is closed to everything. So I don't think our regulations have anything specific to lionfish. Jocelyn, I believe that you were also looking into that. So I would assume that it's all fishing. I understand the concerns with, with fishing for lionfish, and I understand that sometimes territorial regulations have a specific regulations for the harvest of lionfish. But that is something that I don't think we have in our regulations, and maybe we can, we can discuss. But let me get back to you to keep looking in here because I haven't seen that before.
In the case of the area we're talking about, during the seasonal closure, no person may fish or possess any Caribbean reef fish. When we put this together, the lionfish was not in the question. And so by default, it is included because it's a reef fish. But it also says, as listed in Table 2 of Appendix A, Part 622. So this is an opportunity for the chair then to take note of this and present it to the council at the next meeting. And then the council will take it from there. What are we going to do with the lionfish? Are we going to make an exception and allow people to fish lionfish whenever they occur at any time during the year? Or we are going to consider the lionfish as another reef fish and add it to the list on Table 2? We have Jocelyn and Patricia. Eddie.
Hi, I was just going to agree with what Maria and Miguel had said, that during the closure, during that time period when that area is closed in the federal waters, there's no fishing at all. So if you were using spears to fish for lionfish, that would be prohibited, because the concern about bycatch, I understand maybe spears are more targeted, but that's at least the thinking behind the regulations. So during that time period, all fishing is prohibited to protect those spawning. So fishing for lionfish with whichever gear you're using. And I was looking to see if we had any gear restrictions. I don't see anything that would, in other areas at different times of years prevent you from using spears to fish for lionfish, but at least within that closed area, no fishing is allowed for any species with any gear.
I saw Mike had it. This is Eddie Schuster for the record. Mike had a question. So his mic is not working. So it said no fishing for tuna, wahoo, dolphin, which are surface fish either.
The present regulation says during the seasonal closure, no person may fish or possess any species of fish except highly migratory species in or from the Germanic Bank. So it might apply also in this area. And then they define fish means finfish, mollusks, crustacea, etc., other than marine mammals and birds. Then highly migratory species include the bluefin and others. So if we follow what they have in St. Thomas and John, is to all species are included, except highly migratory species.
Miguel, if I may. So this is Maria Lopez. So the regulations for Germanic Bank are specific to exempt the HMS species, and so the regulations of this red hind aggregation area and land bank apply for all fishing. So that means that you cannot fish for anything in there during this closure. So they are different. Let me read them. They are in the regulations. It says, red hind spawning aggregation areas. From December 1st to February 28 each year, fishing is prohibited in those parts of the following areas that are in the EEC. Each area is bounded by rum lines connecting in order to point listed. NA is east of St. Croix, and this is that area of Langban, and it has from point A to point F. It has all the latitudes and longitudes where this is included. So all that will include all of those species that are mentioned in here. This is something that this is not new. This has been like this for a long time since this red hind spawning aggregation area was put in place. I'm hoping that clarifies the question.
Yeah, but the thing is, Mr. Chair, if I may, and thank you, Maria, for that clarification, is that since the get-go, when they established the highly migratory species office in the 90s, there's always a question whether we should amend all the Atlantic Seaboard Council, we needed to amend or not our regulations. Now we had the island-based FMPs that include the wahoo and the dolphin. So there is a point for discussion at the next meeting that should be brought to the attention of the council. The easiest way to do it, just leave it as is. So you don't have any bycatch, you just go out. But also the Management Act encourage people not to lose yield unnecessarily. So the issue have several ramifications. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that you should bring this to the attention of the council and see what happens. And also we need to hear from the DAP members, what is your pleasure? You would like this to be reviewed, leave it as is, and so forth.
Carlos had I'm getting familiar with looking at this chat, especially being the chair of this meeting. Carlos he wants to speak. Carlos, go ahead. And then if you put your hand up and you want to talk again, then leave your hand up with the icon there. But if not, then please take your hand down. I see Jocelyn's still up and Maria is still up. But Pat, if your hand is up still, then leave it. And then I'll say what Mike wanted to say in the chat that he wrote. Carlos?
Yeah, good morning. I just wanted to mention that maybe we need to, like Miguel said, discuss this in our next meeting and have an amendment to our St. Croix FMP to include allowing for the pelagic fishing. Also on Mike Funk, when it comes to lionfish, I believe that, and I've always been an advocate of this, that organizations like CORE should be given special permits to hunt lionfish in MPAs because they're just growing in abundance there because they can't be touched.
Thank you, Carlos. I'll read from the chat what Mike said here. Hold on. Mike said, yes, please. This is a very productive area during that time of the year for the closure. And he's talking about wahoo and all the pelagics. So this is something that we're going to have to, if we can, I don't know if we can, go back and revisit. Gerson, during that time of the year, you guys don't transit through there for lobster, at least if we're hunting for lobster?
Well, the law states that you cannot fish in there. So I don't participate in doing none of that stuff when there's closed. My main catch right now is with traps, lobsters and conch by diving, but we don't have any conch areas in that place.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's closed, right? It's closed year round to all fishing for any reef species, correct? This is what I'm hearing.
It's closed during the hind spawning season, but during the year it's open for diving, but not bottom gear.
That's not what I understand. Can somebody confirm? I think it's
Yes.
Graciela or Maria said it.
And of course, this is Maria. So yes, so this closure in this particular area is it's called the Red Hind Aggregation Area closure. So it's in particular for when the red hind is aggregating to reproduce, right? So this occurs from December 1st to February 28th. And during that period of time, during December 1st to February 28th, there's no fishing, like at all, right? No species. But during the rest of the year, the bank is open to fishing, to all fishing. The difference is that to protect the habitat that supports these spawning aggregations, the council a long time ago prohibited the use of bottom tending gear, gill nets, trammel nets. And bottom tending gear, we're talking about traps. Okay, so you can use other gear in that area all year round, as long as you don't go fishing during December 1st to February 28th. Just throughout the year, those bottom tending gears and the other ones that I mentioned are not allowed to be used. Does that clarify, Ed, or do you have more questions?
No, it clarifies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So, Mr. Chair, you have, well, I have my hand raised because I have a question for Mike or anyone who fishes for lionfish in the land bank.
Okay, go ahead.
So, is anyone keeping track of the amount, the size of lionfish that is being harvested from within that MPA, that land bank area? And if someone is doing that, is that accessible to be included in what you're discussing? For example, the allowance of harvesting lionfish from that area, even when it's close to all other fishing.
This Mike Funk. I'm also on the board of directors of the Core Foundation. I'm getting feedback for some reason. And we do have a website where we keep track of lionfish that are taken in different specific areas. But Lang Bank is really not a place where core divers go on any kind of a regular basis. I think I might be the only one that's ever gone out there hunting lionfish. So that's a great question. And I don't think we really have any data that would be significant. Gerson goes out there more often than I do. He might, you know, he might not have any recorded data, but he might be able to give anecdotal comments about what he sees in terms of lionfish.
Well, lately we haven't been seeing that abundance of lionfish in the shallows, but we outside that area, I have pots from the South Shore all the way from Provenza to Point Udall, St. Croix, and then I have some in the deeper areas of Land Bank. But we are catching more lionfish in the deeper waters, over 100 feet, than in the shallow. So I don't know if they're transiting to the deeper water where fishermen don't kill them, but we haven't been seeing much in the shallows.
Thank you. Thank you. You have Patricia and Carlos, Mr. Chair.
I saw Pat's hand up for a while now. Okay, Pat, go ahead. If not, Carlos, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to have a question for Funk. Do you have, does Core have a special permit to hunt for lionfish in the MPA of the Eastern Marine Park?
We don't have any special permits for any of the MPAs in St. Croix. They do in St. Thomas, but not in St. Croix.
Okay, thanks. I thought you had a permit to do the Eastern Marine Park for lionfish.
No, we've been trying, but there's been some resistance because, you know, people are out there hunting lionfish. Who knows what else they might be taking? So, so we haven't been able to get that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I saw, hold on a second. I saw, Maria, is your hand up?
Yeah, yes, it
William
is.
is up. So Maria and then William.
You can get William first, and I'll go at the end.
Okay, Toby, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I've had some problems with my connection. I was offline for a while and now have been reconnected. But in regard to enforcement of the regulations in the closure area on Lang Bank, I've been up there recreational fishing, trollings at certain times of the year, and the Coast Guard has basically practice crews down here, and they stop recreational and commercial vessels and do safety inspections, drug checks, that sort of thing. But they've never asked any questions in regard to fisheries. And they seem to be unknowledgeable in regard to fisheries regulations in our area. And perhaps that's something that can be improved.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So thank you for bringing that up, because we do participate in the living resources training of the Coast Guard. So we will make sure that that gets included. Our chairman, Marcos Hanke, usually participates in that training. So I'll make sure that that is included in the in this year's training. Thanks.
There's somebody, Maria, I think you were next.
Yeah, and I think Patricia is ready for her question.
Okay, Pat, are you there? And then I see Marsha's hand up. Pat, are you there?
Yes, Eddie, you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because I'm having connection issues like Toby. Yes, my main issue is that from October through December 31st, you have a closure up there for snapper, the blackfin, the yellow eye, the black silk, so forth. And then you have the closure for the hind. So my question is that, so are you saying that once the closure ends for the snapper, the silk and so forth, that you can't fish for them again until the hind closure is done? And secondly, what if you fishing in the deeper water, can you transverse that area with your fish that you've caught?
Can someone answer that? Maybe Jocelyn?
Okay, so if I may, I mean, we do have Maria and Jocelyn, but the closure for the snappers doesn't apply in the in St. Croix.
Graciela, the closure applies on federal waters, in all federal waters. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, you are correct, only applies to St. Thomas for their territorial waters.
Yeah, but let's clarify that for the EEC, the closure for medium black seal and blackfin applies because it's throughout the U.S. Caribbean.
This is Maria. So yes, so from October 1st to December 31st in federal waters, that means from waters from 3 nautical miles all the way to 200 miles in St. Croix, the silk black, blackfin, and vermilion snapper is closed. That closure does not, it doesn't apply in territorial waters. If the fishing for those species occur in those deeper waters that you are talking about are in federal waters, then you cannot fish for those species in there. Regarding the excuse me, the red hind, when that closure of the red hind occurs, which is in that portion of the EEZ, which is that little portion, it's not in the whole bank. That means that there's no fishing of any fish. So if somebody were going to fish for sick blackfin or any other fish in that portion, then that is not allowed. But you can go through other areas. The question about transit, I'm going to see if Jocelyn has anything to say about transit, because I believe there's a possession limitation in there, but let me see if Jocelyn is able to address that. Otherwise, I'll look and I'll get back to you.
Mr. Chairman-
Oh, sorry, Miguel.
No, go ahead. It's just, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, no problem. So this is Jocelyn, just for the record. So the prohibitions, they talk about fishing for or possessing the species, and then they say in or from the EEZ. So during the closure for vermilion, black, silk, blackfin, snapper, you can't fish for those species or you can't possess them, like when you're in the EEZ or if the fish are from the EEZ. So let's say you're possessing those snappers during the closed period and you're in state waters. If they can prove that you got those from federal waters, that would be a violation. That's, I don't, sort of difficult to prove, but the prohibition is you can't possess the species in federal waters or from federal waters. So you can't go fishing and then come over into state waters and be safe unless you were just fishing in state waters and there isn't a closure there. So that's for the snappers during that closed season. And then the Lang Bank closure, that's just prohibiting fishing in that particular area. So for that to be a violation, you'd have to be found fishing during the closed period in the closed area. So that's for the red hind spawning aggregation area off St. Croix. That's December 1 through February 28th of each year.
Hello, it's Pat again. I just want to ascertain, say the spawning area for the red hind is closed, and then you say Lang Bank is closed. So that takes up a large area there. So all I'm asking is that once the closure ends for the snapper in federal waters, that you can't continue fishing at that Lang Bank area for snappers again until the hind's closing. That's all I'm trying to ascertain.
So the timing of it is October 1 to December 31 for the snappers. And then that sort of intersects with the period Lang Bank is closed, if that's the area off St. Croix that we're talking about. So it's referred to in the regulations as the red hind spawning aggregation area. And then as Maria said, it's east of St. Croix, then they provide the citation. So that area is closed from December 1 to February 28th. So if you're only fishing for those snappers, first, you can't fish anywhere in federal waters from October 1 to December 31. Then you just can't fish from December 1 to February 28th in that area off the east coast of St. Croix. But from January 1, through the end of September, you can fish for those snapper species where there's not a closure. So not in that area off the east coast of St. Croix, and not in any other closed areas. I don't know all the closed areas off St. Croix off the top of my head, but the one we've been talking about, I believe, is that Lang Bank area. So you wouldn't be able to go fish there for the closed snapper species until February ended, so until the beginning of March. And then until the closed season starts, which is the beginning of March to the beginning of October.
Eddie? There are a couple of things that we are mixing here, and this merits some discussion. And probably I asked Alida to put together the flyer to remind everybody what the regulations are. But there couple of questions. I asked Carlos to be here because of her experience on enforcement. And there's a question regarding to innocent passage. In some areas, for example, when you cross from one island to Puerto Rico, they have an area there that is federal and another one. When you come from Puerto Rico, Mona Island, you are in the area of jurisdiction of Puerto Rico while you are in Mona Island. But when you're crossing to Mayagüez, you cross through the EEC. And a question came up that is similar to what you have here. And the resolution by the lawyers at that time that were working on enforcement was that if you have any gear on board that is capable of fishing the species that is prohibited, you might be in violation. In some areas, the regulation says if you have possession, so possession, whether you have a gear or not capable of catching that fish, is a violation. The other one is that you may have gear on board, but it's not deployed, then you're innocent. And so innocent passage allows you to have gear on board that is not deployed. So that's what I asked Carlos, because it's also something that have to do with the compatible regulation project that they have in St. Croix. Because in some areas that we have, let's say, converge the local government intention, goals and objective with that of the federal, we need to have those compatible regulations. And I don't know the stage of that regulation. So Carlos, do you have any idea if we are going to ever have compatible regulations? And also, can you address the enforcement issues regarding innocent passage in the area of jurisdiction of the US Virgin Islands, St. Croix?
Sure. There is innocent passage in play at for the Buck Island Monument and for the East End Marine Park. As long as your gear is stored, you can pass through with your gear and your catch, as long as the gear is stored. On compatibility, I sent a message on the chat, but we've already completed our compatibility discussions, and we have submitted our recommendations to Fish and Wildlife for review with their staff and the commission, and then to the commissioner. And we're just waiting to see what the department is going to accept for compatibility. I think a better person to update that would be either Director Angeli or Senai Haptis as to what they have done so far, but we've already completed our mission on compatible regulations.
Maybe they can disclose that information at the next council meeting if they're present.
Yeah, and if they're ready for that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the Coast Guard on Lang Bank, when I heard them talk about, I think it was Toby talking about the Coast Guard not enforcing fisheries. The problem with the Coast Guard, it's not really a problem, but their mission mostly, or priority, is drug interdiction and immigration issues. However, they do have a specific group and a cutter that does fisheries enforcement, because we've interacted with them before, and they've actually held people for us to go for them when they catch them in doing fishery violations. But that's a specific cutter or a specific crew that does that. Not every Coast Guard cutter that's out in the ocean does fishery. So I think that's I know Marcus does fish identification for the Coast Guard training. I'm not sure how much of that occurs here, but it's very specific to the crew that does that. It's not everybody, not every Coast Guard cutter.
Okay, I see Maria's. You done, Carlos, or you still got more to say?
Yeah, for now, I'm done.
Okay. All right, Maria, and then
Yes.
we got to move on to the other.
Okay.
Business.
This is Maria Lopez. So I have a couple of propositions. One is, it seems that there are several questions about enforcement, Coast Guard, transit, etc. So my suggestion to this DAP is to maybe write those down and bring that as part of their report to the council for the April meeting. So those questions can be addressed, and for the record, during that meeting, we have representatives from the Coast Guard in the council. We have our enforcement from NOAA Fisheries and also from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we can also make sure from NOAA Fisheries that we have the information to answer those questions. So they are for the record in the meeting. The other proposition that I have is, like, I see that there has been a lot of discussion about the different kinds of fishing that may or may not occur in these areas during the closure or after the closure, etc. And if you can have good rationales and as to what would you like, if you would like the council to evaluate changes to an area or to a closure, etc., you can always request that, and that will be a change to a regulation as long as it's something that it's supported, by the science, etc. So you always have choices to bring that up to the council if this is something that you want to do. The third thing that I wanted to clarify is that we call it land bank, but it's not really land bank, saying we have a closure in land bank. But keep in mind that the federal portion that it's closed, and I don't know, Graciela, at some point, if you can bring that map again, it's just a little portion on the corner of that whole area, right? It doesn't mean that the whole area is closed, at least during the red hind aggregation closure period from December 1st to February 20th. It's just that portion to all fishing. When we're talking about the closure, the seasonal closure for the species, for the snappers, that applies throughout the whole federal waters. So that fishing can occur in territorial waters because there's not a compatible regulation for that. Okay, but that portion that it's in federal waters, that fishing is not allowed to happen because during the red hind closure, because it's close to all fishing. So my recommendation will be, if you have any questions, write them down in your report, and then we'll make sure to answer everything. Thank you. Thank you, Graciela. That if you see the Graciela's cursor, she's marking that area in there. That's what we call the red hind aggregation area. In our regulations, it's called east of St. Croix. So that's also, if there's fishing in that white area that it's in there, Graciela, to the left, yeah, that it's not part of that red hind aggregation area closure. Thank you.
So my suggestion, Graciela, is to help Eddie in his report to write down these questions, because I agree 100% with what Maria said. And we can bring that to the council at the next meeting, and probably between April and August, which is the following meeting, we may have some answers to these questions. In addition, once we have the answer to the question, we are going to put a flyer, infographic or whatever, better information in a way that be understood by everybody in the public, fishers and so forth, because to read the Code of Federal Regulations is kind of difficult sometimes if you're not accustomed to it. So from the meeting, Mr. Chairman, we have the list of questions that Maria suggested. We also will have a request to the Outreach and Education to look into, put together, not the Outreach and Education, but to Ali Ortiz and myself. We're going to be working on better tool for conveying the right message, taking in consideration these questions.
Okay, I just entered in the chat my email, and it's to everybody, DAP members. That's my email. So send all your comments to me, your bullets. You can sell it in a bullet form, and I can include it into the report for April 19th and 20th meeting. Any other questions so we can move on?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Carlos. I just want to clarify one thing when it comes to compatibility and what the St. Croix FAC has done. We've only worked on the St. Croix compatible regulations. I'm not sure what's going on St. Thomas or Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Maria, you still have your hand? You want to say something else?
No, sorry.
Mr. Chema, we can ask.
I'm sorry, through the chair, this is Toby. A question for Graciela. In regard to the work that Rick Nemeth has done surveying snapper, grouper populations, I think it's just grouper populations on Lang Bank. Has he identified sufficient or numbers to warrant spawning protection for any other grouper species? Yellow edge, yellowfin, black grouper on Lang Bank.
As far as I remember, no. And not only that, but historically, St. Croix fishers had asked that the Lang Bank area be shifted so that it would actually encompass more of the spawning area rather than the way it's set up right now. And if I remember correctly off the top of my head, UVI work has been mostly on the inner side of the bank towards more towards St. Croix than on the outer bank. So there is one report on the mesophotic reefs that it's in our library in the web page that was conducted a number of years ago. So I can take a quick look at that. And I'm trying to remember. So that's what I remember from the information that we have. But thank you for the question, Toby, because there is a big effort by the Southeast Fisheries Science Center and the regional office and the council to look to make an inventory of all these projects that have taken place. Some of them might just be reports, some of them might be published literature. So Rachel Eckley has been presented to the council the updated versions of this gathering of reports, because we've, some of us have been complaining that people come and do work and then they disappear and we don't know what happened, what came out of that work. So there is a big effort right now to do that. And specifically, the council is also looking into the literature that it's available for all of the MPAs that they have in place, that we have in place. Okay, so we are currently working on that. So I'll take a look at the papers that I have in my laptop and get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Graciela. Just in addition to that question, MPAs, specifically the Lang Bank Red Hind spawning area closure and the mutton snapper area off the south west side of the island, were established many, many years ago. There have been reports from fishers that that these populations may have shifted, or they're not in the same area that they were initially when these closures were established. Is there work planned in the future by the council to reassess these areas, perhaps using updated technologies in identifying more precisely where these locations are?
So funny that you ask. So a collaboration of different scientists and the council, we just submitted a proposal to see if in year 3, after establishing a protocol to look at irrigations, we will be moving to Lang Bank to do the survey in Lang Bank and establish, if there had been any shift or any changes in either the timing or the area. So number one, yes, the literature is being reviewed to assess, as best as possible, the changes that have taken place. 2, there are a number of initiatives to go look specifically at the populations within the MPAs. And number 3, we are requesting that anyone that has that kind of information and can provide that to the council. We have the history. I don't know if you remember the history of that shift that fishers wanted in Lang Bank to move the shape of Lang Bank more toward the south and open up the northern part of the bank. So all this will be brought into the daylight again. So thank you, Toby.
This is Edward Schuster. There was a comment I'd like to make. Didn't Rick Nemeth just do this with acoustic equipment with Jonathan Brown? And he got some recordings when he did a presentation. It was before Irma Maria, so it had to been 2015, maybe 2014.
So if I may, yes, and these are part of the reports that we need to bring back to light. If I remember correctly, it was just on the state side of the Lang Bank, because remember that big difference in depth within the Lang Bank area and more towards the inside. But one of the things that it's also happening is that the DPNR, Dr. Senai Haptis, is looking, we're working to get information from all the permits that have been provided by the DPNR for research to be conducted so that we can have a better understanding of where specifically this work has taken place. So that's also in the works, and that should be provided back to the council when we have the updates on all the projects that are ongoing.
You have Gerson with the hands up.
Go ahead, Gerson.
Graciela, to the point, Gerson Martinez for the record. I don't recommend you guys move any existing markers, because when I work with Rick Nemeth and doing those study, the hind wasn't the only species spawning up there. And when they do come to spawn, they cover from the north to the south, and even in the outer bank, where what we call the second bank, up to 120 feet, those guys used to do some crazy deep dives. They saw Nausa groupers and big groupers in that area. So I believe if you guys try to move those boundaries, you might open a well-protected spawning irrigation to be fished out, because old fishermen give knowledge to young fishermen. And if you open that area there, you might do a harm in 1 year that has been trying to protect from so many years.
So thank you, Gerson, and that's one of the reasons why the council is looking at the determination of how efficient these PAs have been. So nothing has been, I'm just saying that things that were on the table before, it's part of the history of the MPAs. So that's all accounted for. So when you worked, I have a question for you now. When you work with Rick Nemeth, how they went down to 120 feet, but that's mostly on the most western side of the Lang Bank, more towards the shallower area, correct?
Gerson, for the record, no, they did the first bank where the Hind aggregation is, and then when they were setting acoustics, they went to the second bank all around in different coordinates. But from this first bank where the Hinds are to the second bank is about a mile and a half, and they put acoustic in all those areas. So they did cover the deeper portions, and to the second bank, it goes up again. It goes down to 180 feet, and then it comes up to about 65 feet in some areas. So they covered all those areas with acoustics and the stuff that they used to track whatever fish they had tagged before. They were using I think sound tracks. ¿Cómo se llama eso? Los taguearon con uno acoustic sensors.
Acoustic tags, yeah.
Right. So whenever that fish used to come to that area, they even found fish months after, all the way to Point Udall, which is about 6 miles from the bank. They were going back to their normal areas.
But thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This has been most informative. Thank you. Thanks, Harrison.
Okay. Any other comments so we can move on?
At this time, Mr.
Graciela,
Chairman, maybe
next.
we
Or
can
Miguel?
ask, yeah, we can ask Mabel to show on the screen, actually Cristina has it, her presentation, part of her presentation where you have the area close around St. Croix that are within the area of jurisdiction of the USB and Island government. Mabel, are you online?
Good morning, guys.
Mabel, will you be able to present to the group the areas that have been closed around St. Croix by the USVI government?
If it's the same presentation that I gave the last time, that's not a problem.
Yes, it's the same one. The same one.
Christina is in control. Hi, everybody. This is Mabel. Some of you guys know me already, the liaison for St. Croix. It's just gonna be, this presentation was about the MPAs of St. Croix. If Christina go on the second slide, the next one. The good thing about this slide, this presentation, is not only covering, like if you will see, we have St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. But of course, my job is only for St. Croix. And what I like, let me close this little thing here. We got the Book Island Reef. We got the Sal River National Historic Park. We have this, the Sal River. Again, like what I like about this is like it'll break it down. Like, okay, so the marine protected areas, the Book Island Reef and the Sal River and St. Croix is governed by the institution of the national, the NPS and the VI Department Natural Resources. It's been in place since 1992, and they have some fishery regulations and they're reviewing in a revision. In the territory marine parks, we got St. Croix Eastern Marine Park. It's been established in 2006. It's being governed by the DPNR. And in some of the level of the protection, they have some AR zone, multiple use with no take. Then we have in the Marine Sanctuary and Wildlife Reserve, we have the Sal River. It's been established in 1995. It's governed by the VI Department Natural Resources, and it have the level of protection is no take. Then we have the fishery closure areas in the marine conservation districts. We have the modern snapper and we have the land bank, and how we were talking about for the first hour of this meeting. How the NOAA and the Cfmc and the VI department are working together to govern in those areas, and it's been established in 1993. And again, just like the presentation before, they have some seasonal closures for that area. And I really have enjoyed that presentation before because it's clarified what can you fish and what can you not fish. And I really like how Maria brought it up, like, if we have any additional questions, that's stuff that we need to keep in place or change, this is the opportunity to do so. And the MPCs, those areas of particular concern, we have a couple of them in the area of St. Croix. We have the Frederickstead waterfront, the Sandy Point, the South Shore Industrial Area, the St. Croix Coral Reef System, APC, the Sal River Bay, the Christianstead waterfront, the Southgate Pond, Shenny Bay, the Great Pond Bay, and the East End. All of them are being governed by the DPNR since 1993, and all of that have multiple use since we know like different fishing, even anchoring, or anything. A lot of things are being done for that. And that's it. Because the next slide is just talking about the, if Christina wants to show the next slide, show the map. So we know for sure of that last list that I just talked about, and you guys were able to see how the MPCs are just the little purple line. Then we see like the territorial MPAs, like different colors, so you could have a better, you know, like I always say, when you see something, you're able to remember it better. So this map, I love it very much. And if anybody would like me to forward to anybody, I could do so. I think Miguel has it, and Christina. I think in the beginning of this slide, in the beginning, I had my number and my email, and anybody could reach out to me so I could share that information. And that's about it. We good, Miguel?
Thank you, Marian.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, through the
And I
chair,
prefer, sorry, Miguel, I prefer this email. My Hotmail is like all my businesses and everything like that. So if anybody could reach me, I rather this is the one for the CFMC. Try to reach me there. Thank
excellent.
you.
Mabel, the question came yesterday regarding advice, regarding area of particular concern, because people tend to confuse, they lump everything together into an MPA, an area of particular concern. The group yesterday requested that we contact the Coastal Zone Management Program to get better information as to why, when, whether there were participation from fishermen and the general public to establish this an area of particular concern. So we are going to invite them to give a presentation on the next council meeting or the council in August to clarify, not to clarify, but to orient the group, the council and the group together. What are the about the area of particular concerns, what law implemented those areas and goals and objectives, etc. So that information will be there. So do you have any information regarding about the area of particular concern established around St. Croix? Or to whom shall we contact in St. Croix to get that information?
I don't have information on it, but I know Dr. Hapties or Nicole Angeli will be the perfect one to talk about that.
Okay.
If you want me, I could, I don't know if you guys have his contact, I could always put it in the chat, his email, Dr. Hapties' email, so you could be able to contact him.
Okay, no, I wanted to make sure, but we are already, we're sending a letter. I wanted to make sure that we covered all bases.
Okay.
So thank you a lot, Mabel.
Thank you, guys.
Good morning again. This is Toby. A question for Marvell, perhaps, and also for the council. Something that has been of concern to the fishers on St. Croix since 2000 has been the expansion of the Buck Island National Monument. The monument was expanded by something like 18,000 underwater acres and did not take into consideration the input from the St. Croix fisheries community. The boundary was expanded by 3 nautical miles seaward of a emergent reef. That 3 miles seaward extends to 5,000-foot depth of water. At that particular time, the Division of Fish and Wildlife had a territorial and federal permitted fish attractor located within the outer portion of that monument. The fish attractor was subsequently removed by Fish and Wildlife. However, the point is that the monument was expanded under the guise of protecting coral reefs. Coral reefs do not extend past really the euphotic zone, which is the upper 100 meters of water. And the fishers lost important areas to fish to the west and north of Buck Island when this monument was expanded. The monument in St. John was also expanded at the same time, but took under the consideration of what the needs of the fishers were there, and includes certain provisions for them to continue fishing. Is there some way that this can be, this issue can be approached again? I understand the importance of marine protected areas, and however, I do feel that this has been an injustice that has been done to the St. Croix fishing community. Your comments would be appreciated.
To the chair, if I may, can I? Hello?
Go ahead, Miguel.
Okay, I was going to say this at the other business, but if you complain about this one, you should see what the Hawaiians have to say about the Papahanua Mukakea Marine Park and Monument. Let me explain a little bit. The area-based management, the concept of area-based management, encompass everything: monuments, sanctuaries, marine reserve area, particular coastline, etc. The Executive Order 14008, the President Biden, called for closing 30% of marine waters and 30% of land for protection on or before 2030. We have a subcommittee of the Council Coordination Committee, that groups all the councils around the United States. And that subcommittee is looking at this particular question, especially the one that Toby mentioned. The monuments are implemented using the Antiques Act. The Antiques Act is something to protect the areas around the United States. You create the Joshua, parks all over the place. And they have a different way of consulting, if they consult at all, with the public when a monument is implemented or is going to be implemented. That's under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior. 14008 called for the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Commerce to address the issue of marine protected areas on this executive order. And they also need to address a common definition of what conservation is. The conservation definition of the Department of Interior is a little bit different from the conservation of the Department of Commerce. All this long story points to the fact that, number one, it's very, very difficult to revise monuments. Once they are implemented, the Department of Interior have a process. They may or not allow fishing in some of the areas as long as you do not harm the organisms that they wanted to protect in the first place. In this case, it's a coral reef. So it is a possibility that they have innocent passage through it, that they can allow fishing for species in the water column, such as mahi-mahi and wahoo, but that's a long process. In addition, they are looking at the areas that we close under the Manson-Stevens Act, and they have determined that, well, they are working on it now, but the draft document that we have seen, it seems that the areas that we have developed and protected as MPAs under the Manson-Stevens Act do not comply with the definition of closing of the percentage that you need to close. So, for example, the land bank is closed year-round to protect the bottom organisms, the shelf in that area, and that might or might not be in compliance with the 14008. If not, then in order to comply, you have to call it a no-take zone for the entire year. If you are going to comply with the percentage, then you need to look around all the United States and see what percentage do you have so far of areas that you call MPAs that comply with the executive order. And if they find that you need to expand those areas, those are, as we say in Puerto Rico, another $20. That's another issue. So I'm telling you all this because we are going to discuss it in April, May, and August. And we have this meeting in May. So the fishery specialist, the general public should be aware of what is happening. Going back to Toby's question, in all honesty and my personal opinion, it will be very, very difficult to change the area that is called monuments in St. Croix and St. John. It might be, we have a little bit of an opening for consideration of what is allowed in terms of fishing within that area. But it's something that it will take a long time to discuss. The areas that we have under the area of jurisdiction of the U.S. Virgin Islands that we call area of particular concern, sanctuaries, or marine protected areas may be considered for this percent that we need to comply with by 2030, if and when they are modified to comply with the requirements that will be developed by the Department of Interior and Department of Commerce Secretary in due time. So it's a long answer to your question, but we have covered two items that we have as we did yesterday. So yeah, it's unfair in a way. When they allow the fishers, in the case of the national park, they call us. And we met with the superintendent to discuss ways that we could allow fishers to participate in that fishery. But when they extended the park all the way down to St. Croix, they didn't call anybody, they just did it. And by the way, the U.S. government participated at the beginning in declaring those areas monuments. And that had been documented by Verdon Brown at council presentations before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the long, long answer.
Thank you, Miguel. Any other questions? Comments?
Yes, sorry, this is Carlos. I wanted to mention that what Miguel was talking about when it comes to APCs versus MPAs. I do believe that coastal zone management is who developed the atlas for APCs in the Virgin Islands. So you may want to check with Commissioner Oriol. And the one, and I think it's important because the APC that they have #3 on the South Shore by the refinery, that was designated a Homeland Security zone right after the terrorist attack in 9/11. So there's no fishing allowed in that whole boundary of directly in front of the refinery. Doesn't go all the way more to the southwest like I saw on that map, but I don't know where that other piece came from.
Yes, that's a good point because we are considering that point too. Whenever you have an area closed because of Homeland Security issues, it's closed to everybody. It's closed to any activity that may harm whatever they are trying to protect surrounding that area. And that's a good point that we should take in consideration. There are very few, I mean, it's a very small percentage, but the people are becoming to be aware of this situation. And if you are not familiar with your area, let's say that you're a tourist and you go to New England or come to Puerto Rico or St. Croix, you may be in violation. And it's a rare occurrence, but it's something that we also need to address. Mr. Chairman, you may have a time for maybe a 5-minute break before Alida's presentation and then your presentation and further discussion. You would like to do that?
Yeah, we could do that. You guys want a 5-minute break? Let's do a 5-minute break.
Okay.
10-minute break.
10
So we'll be
minutes?
back. I'm sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. 10 minutes?
Yeah, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back here at 11:45. 10:45.
Hola.
Te vemos bien y vemos
Ok.
Hola.
diapositiva.
Perfect.
Okay, everybody, about to start again. Is Alida there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Alida. Everybody ready? When you're ready, we could start.
I'm ready.
Okay, Alida, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity. This is the presentation that we did at the 177th meeting of the council that was strictly related to MPAs. And obviously my interest is the outreach and education strategies on MPAs from the stakeholder participation aspect. And this is something that I have been taking notes in the meeting yesterday with the St. Thomas St. John DAP and today with the DAP of St. Croix. And when Miguel mentioned before that we have to make some kind of document, it can be a small poster, it can be a fact sheet, but something that has the regulations in place for these protected areas. So I'll share with you, and some of the slides, I will go very fast through them because we have already discussed the maps and this is only St. Croix. Christina, please, the next one. You all know that the definition of that MPA is very important, not only from the perspective of the stake of the fishers that use the area to gather the products, the fish, the seafood that they then use in the market. But it is a clearly defined geographical space, recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. That's the way we have to look at the MPA. This is the definition of the MPA. And what are they protecting? Ecologically significant ecosystems, the habitats, the processes, and taxa from mangrove, shallow coral reef, seagrasses, deep coral reefs. And what is allowed? In some areas, multiple uses. In some, there is prohibited extraction of the living resources. And that's something that we have been discussing, that I have been taking notes as to what do you need in terms of outreach and education strategies or products that will help understand better the function of the MPA. Next, please. This you have seen already. We can have the next one. The next one, please. These are the MPAs in the US Virgin Islands, and here we have the same maps that you have been seeing, presented by Mabel, presented by Graciela. These are the areas, and we're making very much emphasis on those that are under the exclusive economic zone and Cfmc jurisdiction. But remember that this marine environment, the ecosystem and the biodiversity that exists there don't know anything about who's managing the territorial government or the federal government, national monuments or what. So we have to look at this and the information that we need for understanding the importance and the function of the MPA, as a whole, as something that is all connected. And in one part of St. Croix, you may have some species, in the other part of St. Croix, you have other species. But if there are regulations, fish don't know. They just go from all over the place. Next one, please. And actually, the first thing that I do in my presentation is, how many MPAs do you know in your area? Because I have found out that including myself. So I have the information on the federal areas in the western part of the island, but then how the organisms that live there and are regulated connect to other areas in Puerto Rico. The same thing is for the Virgin Islands, the same thing is for any place where you have protected areas. So we have to know them. No, please, next one. Next one. So to me, it's very important, the stakeholders' participation. And it is from the beginning of this designating an MPA to the status that we are now, where we have the MPAs designated, but what is the participation of the stakeholders? It has to be in terms of the social, cultural, and economic aspects. It is not only tourism, it's not only what you take out and sell in a market, it is the community as a whole. They contribute the traditional and local ecological knowledge of the marine ecosystems in the MPA and the historical relationship with the area. This is very, very, very important because we have different cultural, different social situations depending on the history of that community, depending on the type of gear they use and why they do it, this type of thing. And they also identify and promote the community's responsibilities for effective management in terms of the prohibitions, in terms of the closed season, which has been today the most direct and intensive discussion that I have heard in these issues of MPAs. Next, please. And who are the stakeholders? From the outreach and education aspect, we are all stakeholders, no matter whether we fish, whether we buy fish, where we do tourism, where we live near the coast. It's the entire fishing community. It is the educators. Much of the information that you have been asking today should be included in many of our education programs, not just the preparing of fishers, but also from elementary school to university. We must have to understand these MPAs. We have to know the habitats, the fish and the other organisms live in that area. We have to know the importance in terms of the geographical conditions of the areas. So we have to work with a formal curriculum. Businesses go from the fisher to the tourism guide to the people who live or who go and buy in the market. And the consumers, once I buy that material, what did I ask for in the market? Which species am I selecting? Do I know about the closed seasons? Are they prohibited at this time that I am buying it? The planners have also to be part of the stakeholder information. And obviously the government agencies, federal, territorial, and in many cases, if we have like municipalities, like in Puerto Rico, we have to know what the municipality that is in the part of the coast, like we have Cabo Rojo, like we have Mayagüez, Rincón in Puerto Rico, do they have regulations that come out of the local government, not just the territorial government, the local government? And in these municipalities, many of the governments have specific persons dedicated to the fishing industry. Next, please. In education, we have to integrate the scientific data on MPAs to all curricular content, not just ecology, not just marine sciences, social sciences, geography, natural sciences, art, environmental studies. We have to have resources for community education, and we have to integrate the fishers in the management decisions. Next. We have already for a long time ago some materials, outreach and education that were produced by Sea Grant in Puerto Rico, like marine protected area resources and concepts for teaching ocean literacy. We don't just have to, memorize what are the concepts of ocean literacy. We have to find how is it adapted to what we have in our area. And they also, UPR Sea Grant produced this publication, Marejada, that had information about the marine protected areas. Next one, please. We did for St. Thomas, St. John Mpas outreach strategies that were a poster with the information in terms of the map, in terms of coordinates, in terms of localization, and also the regulations that have to be followed in that area on those MPAs. And that information is in a poster, is also in a fact sheet. And we also had to accompany this, not just for the MPA, but there were placemats, seafood of St. Thomas, St. John, one directed to local restaurants, and the other one with different species, some of them to the tourism restaurants. We can do the same thing, the same strategy for St. Croix. And we can put the protected areas under the federal jurisdiction, and then a list or a map of the other areas that are affecting the fishing community and also the regulations. Next. And also for information to the public, I think that all MPAs should be adequately identified with pertinent information for the users, consumers, fishers, and tourists. I don't think it is enough to just have a name of the area and that's it. We can have different signs, different type of signs, like the one you have here for Salt River, Boca Island Reef, and then the one we have here that I have as an example, the Reserva Marina de Isla Verde. This poster is in front of the entrance to that reserve, and they have what can be done, what cannot be done, what type of organisms live there. And this is information that once you get to the place, you see where you are and what are you expected. What do you expect to find there, and what should be your behavior in the area. Next one, please. So what I received today, or what I have heard today, we have the ideas, and Miguel mentioned it before. We must get that information on the regulations to everyone. I would like you to give us ideas, recommendations, and we already initiated a conversation with the liaison and with who was the person, Miguel Carlos Farchete, to do something like this, like the one we did for the St. Thomas, St. John, to get the information for the marinas, for the places where the people, go and visit the reserve, or just for tourism, for the restaurants, for all that. That's the idea that I get today. So I would like to have your suggestions, recommendations, whether you have information already that should be put in another, way. We can do it from the outreach and education in the council. And that's my presentation. Any questions?
Excellent presentation. Any questions for Alida?
William. You have William Tobias with the hand up.
Toby, go ahead, Toby.
Alida, thank you very much for your presentation. Can you back up one slide, please, from where you are now?
That one, okay.
Yes, thank you. The insignia in the middle,
Mhm.
is this a concept insignia? The reason why I ask is because Salt River Bay is a joint Park Service Virgin Islands government entity, and you've only recognized the National Park Service.
Okay, this one I took out of from the internet information. So it's the one that is there that I know of. But in the material that should be produced, if you need more science, we can work with through the council and outreach and education to make other types of science. That's what I would like to hear.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, in this case, if somebody else or someone think about suggestions for Alida to improve the outreach and education efforts that she's leading, you may write to her or to me directly, and I'll pass the word to her because it's important. Her email is there, alida1ortiz.cfmc@gmail.com, because outreach and education is a continuous effort. It's not that I have a poster in 2021 and I don't need any poster until 2024. In this case, what the council is trying to do is to make sure that our outreach and education efforts are updated, that are current, and that are using the best available tools that we have. That's why we have these meetings being broadcast in YouTube and other media. We also have a very active outreach and educational panel. Actually, Gerson Martinez is part of that panel. And that's all we wanted to do today. As I said, one example of what Alida is talking about and what Toby mentioned, some of these signs are outdated and the contributors are not usually acknowledged. We have areas that are being put together by an interagency component, interaction committee. And that's why we have in Puerto Rico a project with the Sea Grant program, where we are going to have signs in 3 closed areas that have been requested by the public in general. For example, in La Palguera, the same site that you're looking at, when you go to a little hill, we are going to put a sign there so people will be able to identify what they are seeing. It's similar to when you go to Mafoli in St. Thomas. They have a big sign there with the photos of what you're seeing, Anegada, British Islands, and so forth. So this is the same thing here. And this sign is not for photograph only. We are going to include in the sign what are the things that you can do and not do within that marine reserve. And also we will have a connection with QR sign that people can get more information, and also where they can contribute with information they find. So sometimes, for example, people who go to La Palguera, they tell me, we should prohibit this and that in La Palguera. And we should limit the number of people that go to La Palguera Reef. Yeah, right. Sometimes for example, right now in Lent, when you have the Good Friday week, and you have thousands of people anchoring all around La Palguera. And when they leave, it's like in a war zone. You see all this, especially the Poritas corals destroyed, seagrass bed destroyed, garbage all over the place. So the Department of Natural Resources is really working very hard to alleviate that issue, to alleviate that problem, but it's still there. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, that's all we wanted to hear from the group. And if you have any question for Alida in the future, please address directly to her or to us.
Okay, like Miguel said, any other comments or suggestions or input that you want to give to outreach and education, you could give directly to Alida Ortiz. Her email is at the bottom there on the left-hand corner of this cover page. Any question? Hearing none, do we go ahead, Miguel?
Yeah, now's the time for your presentation or just your comments. What is it that you need from this group to enhance your presentation at the council on April 1920?
Right. I emailed the presentation that I did at and I gave it to Christine Olan.
Yes, right on the screen now.
Right. Did everybody get this? That is that was emailed, this presentation?
Eddie, I didn't get it.
You didn't get it, Marcia?
No, I did not. When did you email it?
I didn't email it. Christina did.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I don't recall getting it.
Okay.
Could I get it?
Edward, excuse me, I received your email and I put it with the files of the for the meeting, but I didn't send it to other persons.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so she didn't send it to anybody else.
But we can send it after the meeting to everybody.
Right. Okay, so we had 15 minutes to do this presentation at the last council meeting. And I started with the marine protected area that was in Langbank furthest, which was the Red Hind. Then I went to the Buck Island Monument. I moved close to the shoreline. I didn't go into an extent that Mabel went into with those other marine protected areas like Christianstead, the South Shore, Frederickstead with all the coral stuff. I was more concentrating on the fisheries part of it. So basically this tells you where the spawning aggregation is, when it was established, the studies that were done into it, and who regulates or manages the species when in there. And it also states that the other species that congregate within the spawning aggregation at the time that this species which is protected, there's other spawning that happen. It tells you where the close season, when the close season is. And I also spoke about the lionfish when it came about and they were spotted in these areas. You want to go to the next slide, Christina? The other one I spoke about was the mountain snapper one, the studies that were done in there, by who it was done by, Barbara Koges and the other scientists, when it was established, the closed season, basically the same thing. And I also spoke about the lionfish within it. When it's closed, and verbally I inputted that the mountain snapper is closed from shoreline to 200 miles, which includes the EEZ. I also spoke about what other commercially fished species were reported in there while they were doing the studies on the mountain snapper as well. And again, the lionfish in 2011 when it came about. Next slide. I spoke when the Buchanan Monument was established. Again, who did the studies in there that I found out, who created it, the expansion depths of it. And also I specified in there that it was the primary fishing ground for fishermen. So, fishermen and, other species like turtles and sharks and what have you raised and so forth. But it was the primary fishing ground for commercially harvested species. I didn't go into, extensive reporting or comments about how the fishermen was affected financially, because we're talking about marine protected areas and in terms of the species and stuff. I did touch on some of the coral in there, and basically that's it. Some of the juvenile habitats that are in there and so forth. So when this report, again, we had 15 minutes to it. There were several other reports that were given before this. Mabel gave a really good report, and it was no sense of being repetitive. I think everybody got the idea of the marine protected areas, and I just spoke on some of the stuff that was not covered or some were covered on there within her report. Alida did an excellent report too as well. So when you get this report, if there's anything that you want to add to it, or I don't think we should go into, like today, Toby made some really good points about the FAD that was in deep water. I spoke on that as well, but it's not in the report. But if there's anything that you want to polish this up, or you want me to add to it, you could send those bullets to me, and then I can add it into it, and then send a report back that everybody could view it in case there's something that's missing. And that's what we got here.
Bobby, can you send Eddie a couple of paragraphs of the points that you brought today?
Then I also spoke about the Eastern Marine Park. Again, lionfish. Fishermen were actually for this closure because it was basically like a restoration. Nobody actually commercially fished in there. There's some people that use it for personal use, and fishermen were all for it. It had protection for most species, reef fish, and I spoke about the closed areas and the no-take areas, as well as the turtle refuge that they have there, and where you can and can't fish from shoreline. So again, like I said, it was 15 minutes. We had to do this presentation and leave it open for comments within the 15 minutes. So it's brief and to the point. But if you want to add anything to this, send me your bullets and comments, and then we can go forward with it.
By the silence, either everybody agree with you or they're hungry, but we need to hear from the group.
Yeah. Any comments or anybody have anything to say or would like to add? Like I said, send the bullets to me and we can go from there, but. Are we still connected?
Yes, we are. I
Yes,
believe
we
that
are.
Eddie, I believe, Eddie, that your report covers all the points that we needed to convey to the council. And Toby's point was regarding the FAD and the depth of the water, and also the participation of fishers when they have these decisions made. I like your presentation because you have the dates where these were considered by the different governments and the evolution of the monument. This should be presented to the full council again in your report. Even though it might sound repetitive to all of us, there will be people at the council meeting who haven't seen this. It will be for the first time. At this time, if we go to other business, yesterday we asked Maria del Mar to give us a very brief update on the island-based FMPs. Remember that each island or each area will have their own FMP. These were approved September 2020, and I asked Maria del Mar, and she does this very good, to give us walk us through what are the next steps once the secretary approves a plan. What are the steps to be implemented, and also to brief telling us what is the status of the island-based FMPs, specifically the one from St. Croix. So Maria del Mar.
Miguel, Maria del Mar had to go to a meeting with Andy Strelchak.
Okay.
She
Yes.
said that
Then-
she would try to be back.
Okay, I can mostly repeat what she said yesterday. Once the management plan is approved, like the island-based FMPs are approved, they were approved on September 2020. Then a set of steps have to be taken. The first one is to work on any actions regarding regulations. So the regional office prepared a document for regulations to establish the FMP. That document is drafted by the regional office, is discussed at the regional office, have a back and forth with the staff of the council. But once that document is ready, it's sent to Washington for review. Once we have the National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA Fisheries, review the document and is considered ready for publication, the document is published for comments, and you have a 30-day period for comments. At that time, fishers and the general public will have an opportunity to comment on the different regulations that are proposed to implement the management plans. In the case of the island-based FMPs, this process has taken a little bit longer because of COVID and the situation. And Maria del Mar informed me yesterday that probably by the end of this year, the documents needed to implement the plan will be ready. So the plans will be probably implemented by 2023. However, the council have considered some suggestions for amendments that have been discussed at the council and that have been brought to the attention of the council. And those amendments can be worked parallel to the implementation of the plan. And Maria del Mar suggested last year that if you have any idea for an amendment, to start working on it or present this to the council. Some of the amendments, for example, can be done now because they deal, for example, the gear definitions. Well, you will see this at the presentations at the council meeting and others. So in summary, I'm not doing justice to Maria del Mar's presentation, but in summary, the management plan will be implemented probably during this year or next. The documentation needed will be provided to the public for comments, to receive comments on the proposed regulations to implement the plan. The timeline will be to hopefully to have this ready by the December meeting. So at the December meeting, you will be able to receive an update. This is where management plans are. The management plan will include ecosystem-based management. So the other actions that we have to consider the ecosystem will be included in the plan. This management plan, as you know, include the wahoo, the dolphin, the mahi-mahi, the dolphin fish. So the DAPs, we have ample opportunity to discuss this and provide input to the council. In addition, we talk about ecosystem modeling, the effort, as you know, of looking at all the components of an ecosystem. And the update is very short, is that the SSC, the Scientific and Statistical Committee of the Council, prepared their ecosystem model. The DAPs also were able, each one of you, to participate in developing the components, the information regarding the components of the models. The Fmps, the University of Puerto Rico project, is working on the links, data needed for those links, strengths that we have, data gaps that we have, and the Pew Foundation also worked in helping us contacting some of the stakeholders from government, especially, and fishery associations. The fishery association were interviewed by Pew and are going to be interviewed also by the Fmps project, people of the project. The update of all this will be presented at the 3 DAPs during the later part of 2022. We'll have a joint meeting where all the members of the DAPs will be invited to participate at these presentations. And it will be hybrid, but it will be in San Juan. Hopefully by that time, the Omicron and all these Greek letters would allow us to meet more people in person. And we will have the presentations there by the experts on ecosystem, on the ecosystem models. We have Graciela, Dr. Richard Apperdon, JJ, which is the scientist working with the Fmps and others, giving presentations to the DAPs. And you will be able to interact with them. Question and answer sessions will be done at each time we have the presentations. So that's all we have, Mr. Chairman, for this meeting today. Graciela, you need to add anything else? Graciela.
I'm here. Graciela, do you have anything else to add?
She may have some audio problems. But that's all we had.
Hear me now.
Oh yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry.
Do you have anything to add?
No.
Another business?
No, you've covered everything.
Okay. So that's all for today, Mr. Chairman.
Déjame, give me a second.
Okay, Alita.
Yes, I would be very grateful if you can give information to the liaison, to Mabel, as to the outreach strategies that will work best for St. Croix on these issues of MPAs. And then we can, talk to her and get the information. Thank you.
Okay.
And now that you're mentioning Carlos and Mabel, please send the information that Arida needs for the placemats and the
I'm
posters.
sorry. I'm gonna do it today. I'm sorry.
Okay. We don't want to put anyone in stuff. It's just that this is the teamwork and we're doing it. So we are grateful to Carlos and you for all this.
Yeah, it's me. It's on me. It's not on Carlos. So Carlos today.
Okay, you need to invite Carlos for a hamburger.
I'm ready. Just get email. You have my list to pick from, so.
Tuna burger.
Excuse me. So, Carlos, you need anything else to add?
I had a question when you were talking about Maria's presentation on IBFMPs. So you mentioned about working, I'm looking at my notes here, that some of the amendments can work, I guess, in tandem or parallel to the IBFMP being implemented.
Yeah, what Maria said was that if we have a list of possible amendments, and one of them was presented to you by you, by the way,
Yeah,
once the staff work with the priorities, which are the development of the regulation and the development of the ancillary documents that they had to prepare to send the FMPs for comment to the public, they can start working on the documentations that they need, or the documents that they know, the documents that they need for the amendments.
okay,
And those amendments will be for each one of the areas. For example, you may have something that is important for St. Croix,
right,
and that not necessarily applies to Puerto Rico or St. Thomas and John and vice versa. So
right,
it is important that we keep that in mind. And at the August meeting last year, I guess it was, we talked about it, and you and others presented some ideas of things that should be considered. In addition, once the fishery ecosystem plan is done and approved, we call it plan, but it's mostly a source document. Any pertinent information will be also included in the island-based FMPs. Whether the island-based FMP will need a modification at that time, that's to be determined. But the process is dynamic, and we hope that in 2023, the plan will be implemented, and all these ideas that we have for regulations will be also implemented. Hopefully by that time, Carlos' dream will be a reality, and you will have compatible regulations across the waters of the USVN Island and the EEZ. And it will be easier then to for the fishers to continue fishing, because right now it's a nightmare. You're fishing in the EEZ, you are bound by some regulation, you fish it within the area jurisdiction of the local government, you have another, and sometimes it's difficult. And then you have the component of the enforcement. We need to also add the enforcement component, because yesterday the general comment was, we have all these MPAs, fine, but we have very little enforcement, and we need more.
right.
So, anyway.
So that means that, and I know how fast time flies, but if the amendments are not addressed in the island-based plan, when it's implemented, we can continue discussion for amendments in the future of that plan, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I was gonna talk about the same thing you just mentioned on compatibility. I don't think that by the time the island-based plans are implemented, we would have compatibility resolved. Although St. Croix is already done, they're just waiting for the government now to submit to the council. But and I'm kind of concerned with that. And I think maybe what I need to do is talk to the commissioner, because I'm wondering if the government will decide to wait until the territory has all their compatibility issues on the table, or if they're willing to go forward with St. Croix because it's done, and then do St. Thomas later. I'm not sure what their idea is going to be.
Yeah, that will be the decision by the local government. But if they follow the approach that the federal government is following, you may have compatible regulation for St. Croix only that will be compatible with the island-based FMP of St. Croix. And the draft regulations will follow the recommendations that are in the plan, and these have been published. So you remember that you prepared a table with the help of Maria, Sarah, and others.
Right.
Where you identify the present regulation, possible regulations, and the ones that are compatible. That word is very important and shall continue, to have this because the worst thing that could happen is, after all these years, the local government have a compatible regulation, and all of a sudden it's changing the federal government. So it doesn't serve any purpose to have that, let's say, situation happening. So at the council, it's important that we have an idea of what those regulations will be. right now, some of the low-hanging fruits are the closures. If you have a closure in the EEC, do we need to have the same closure in the area of jurisdiction of the U.S. Virgin Islands? And vice versa, if you have a closure in the U.S. Virgin Islands for any species that I share with the federal government, then the local government shall ask and this is something that Roy Crafty said at one meeting, shall ask the federal government, we would like to have compatible federal regulations
Right.
similar to what we have here. So it works both ways.
Yeah. And all that is in the document. And a lot of
Yes.
it is really language, so it's kind of simple to fix.
Yes. In addition, for compatible regulations, if you need assistance from the council to have, let's say, a brainstorming session with fishers and anybody, we can have those meetings. The HRB requested by the local government, but we have authorization to facilitate those meetings with for example, if you want to have a meeting in Frederiksted and other in Christiansted to discuss this with the fishers, we have mechanisms to do that. If you want to have a virtual meeting to discuss it with, we also have that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else?
There's a hand raised by somebody.
Hold on a second. Gerson.
Yes, Eddie, to the point, this question is for Miguel. In the past, one time ago in El Convento, the consul almost closed the fishing for queen conch in the EECs. And due to information that was brought forward there, saying how much we have been protecting this resource, it was not closed that time. In the future, if any species is banned or closed in the federal waters, let's say conch, snappers, hinds, how will that affect the resource or the income of the fishermen in the state waters?
That's exactly what we need to address with compatible regulation, and it's an excellent question. By the way, the reason why the queen conch was not closed in the EEC of St. Croix was because, number one, the biology information that we have sustained it to keep the queen conch open, and also the socioeconomy of the fishery was the other component to convince the Secretary of Commerce through our management plan that we did not need to close the area. If a fishery becomes threatened in a way, not threatened the endangered species, but if the species have a need for management that will include any closures, prohibitions, closed season, etc., in the federal government. And that species is mostly in the EEC, like a pelagic species. Then it will be closed using the national standard. You have to prove that it's needed to be closed or it needed to be managed in a certain way because of the scientific information regarding the abundance of that species. Number two, you need to look at the socioeconomy. However, the impact on the socioeconomy is of less importance. And let me qualify less importance under the law, because they said, it's the fish. If you don't have the fish, you don't have socioeconomy. So you need to balance all this. But going back to your question, if the fishery is in jeopardy, then the number one priority of the federal government is to protect the species. And the second priority will be to look at the socioeconomy of it, and then probably look at ways that the economic impact should be of a lesser extent to the fishing community than other alternatives that we can use. So in essence, the answer to your question, the answer, the species go first, and the species is in need of a closing period or closed areas or what have you, then that goes first.
Miguel, I could add to what Gerson has just said, and this is going to raise an interesting question. I hope it doesn't open a can of worms. But if we're going to go to compatibility in terms of that deep water snapper, it's closed in Lang Bank. But St. Croix is in a unique position where our depths of our water are pretty close by, and they're within the 3 mile limit. that you could still catch these species. That's why it's closed in federal and not territorial. But if we're going to go to compatibility, then it's going to have to be closed in territorial as well,
No,
because then you're going to be impacting fishers' income drastically there, where some fishers, they switch to different methods when another species is closed.
yeah. That's the thing about compatibility. Compatible doesn't mean identical. What the law says is that you can have a more restricted measure, but not less restricted measure of a federal regulation when you are protecting a species. But in the case of St. Croix specifically, one of the issues that we discussed in the get-go with St. Croix, and that's why we were, if you look at the map, you have 100 fathom control line around St. Croix in this case, meaning
Yeah.
that the water beyond that area is open. In this case, for example, let's take the queen snapper, excuse me. If you develop a fishery for the queen snapper, and the queen snapper sustain that fishery, there's no need to have a closure any place. Maybe you may have a quota or whatever. And then the compatible regulation could say the local government will manage the queen snapper and will adopt the same regulation as the federal government. In the case of Puerto Rico, that's one bill that was approved for some time, but then it was disapproved at the Senate, where they have a proposed regulation, actually to include it in the law, that will say the local government of Puerto Rico will adopt exactly the same management measure as the federal government for the species that are shared between the two. So in this case, going back to your question, on one string, yes, if you have compatible regulation, the compatible regulation says whatever the federal government decides on this species, we are going to implement in the local government. That's it. But you can say, we will review this, you as a government, local government will say, we'll see this on a case-by-case basis. And if we think that closure or the management tool of this particular species is not necessarily true for the US Virgin Islands local area of jurisdiction, then it's up to the local government to decide what to do. There's a term that people hate in the federal government, it's preemption. Preemption is when the Secretary of Commerce goes all the way to the shoreline over the rules and regulations of the local government, states or territories, because it's in need of protecting a resource that the local state or territory doesn't want or cannot protect. This is similar to what happened to the billfish. The billfish regulation go all the way to the shoreline. If you establish a billfish regulations, no matter where you are, the billfish regulation will trump over the local government. So that's rarely done. They rather work with compatible regulation than imposing the federal government. And in the case of the federal government imposing on any particular species, they have to prove, number one, that the fishery is mostly in the federal zone, but it's shared at least 50-50 between the local government. If the species is mostly in the area of jurisdiction of the local government, then the local government regulation go over the federal. But this is important. This is a discussion that we should have more and more and engage the local governments in these discussions. By the way, yesterday, this is not business, but Julian is going to include it. The local government is part of the DAPs, and they didn't show up yesterday, and they are not here today except for the liaison officer. So that's something that they are going to discuss at the meeting in April.
Okay. So anybody else with any other comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. This is Carlos. The on discussion of compatibility again, we made recommendations on exactly the same topic, talking about snappers from one area to the other area. And if I recall, I think there's only one group of snapper species that the fishermen did not want compatibility on. The rest of them, they had language in there to work things out. But
one of the sample is the yellowtail.
Yeah.
Fish for yellowtail at night mostly. And they said the yellowtail doesn't have any need for the stringent measures. So why prohibit the yellowtail in some of the areas when it is demonstrated by the biology and by the socioeconomy? There's no need to have more manifestation aside from the 12-inch minimum size.
Right. We agreed on, our recommendation was to go ahead and have 12 inches in territorial waters also.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, I think the lane snapper, those species under where lane is, I can't remember them all, that have a closed season in federal waters but not territorial waters. That's the only one that the fishermen wanted to maintain open. The rest they actually made recommendations to agree, and some made different recommendations. But and my concern with that was that when we completed, when everybody had their turn in the FACs to make their recommendations, I felt that we should have held a meeting to vote up or down those recommendations and then submit to the government one package. But Fish and Wildlife decided otherwise. They said, no, we're going to take everybody's recommendation and work that out. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be at the end.
Okay. That sounds like we have to have a discussion in the FAC with Fish and Wildlife. You think, Carlos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a couple of things here that Mike Fuller wants in the FAC also, and Toby when it comes to FADs. So we got a busy agenda coming up.
Okay. Perfect. So with that, hearing any more comments or any more questions, can we adjourn the meeting, Miguel?
Yeah, just say the date and the time.
Okay.
You have Maria Lopez is back. She has her hands up.
Okay, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, this is Maria Lopez. Sorry, we had to momentarily, we had another meeting that we were hosting. Did you have any specific questions for us that we were not able to answer before?
No, we covered as much as we could of your
Okay,
presentation
perfect.
yesterday. So
Okay, and then the other thing I was going to recommend, I remember that, you know, that when during your past meeting, you had several recommendations that you presented to the council. You always have the choice of bringing them back to the council whenever convenient to you, whenever you want these things to happen for further action. Like if there's something, you know, and I'm mostly talking about recommendations of management change for federal. Like we can always entertain, obviously the council can always entertain recommendations from the DAP for further evaluation in an amendment, or, you know, tasking it to the SSC. If there's anything else at this point, we talk about that we have two actions that we're going to be bringing to the upcoming council meeting. It's going to be management measures for pelagics, and this is something that the DAPs had as a recommendation before, looking into you know, the potential for setting size limits or back limits or trip limits, etc. We're also going to be talking about the prohibitions or evaluations of the use of gill nets for the rest of the species, and also trolling gear, etc. So all of those things were discussed too at the previous DAP meetings. But if there's anything else that you would like to bring to council attention, you're certainly more than welcome to do so at the council meeting. And thank you for letting us participate in this. And if you have any particular questions that you want to send to us, so we can convey it to our enforcement group or lawyers, etc., please send me an email.
Okay.
Yeah, and Maria, I just repeated what you said at the meeting previously. It's just that You said that if you have any topic for, similar to what you're saying now, but you said that if you have any topic that may be considered for a possible amendment to the island-based FMPs, you can bring to the council any of those suggestions. And you also said that the priority will be to work on the document that you need to implement the island-based FMP. But these topics of possible amendments can be identified, so the staff can start working on the appropriate documents for those possible amendments. So they all agree that that's what they would like to do.
And that's great. That's the council just need to give the go ahead and make the motion and we'll make it work. And if the council, some of these things also will need to be tasked to the SSC for further evaluation as well. So that's something that the council can do at the council meeting too.
Okay. Any other hands or questions? Seeing none. Okay, so today is Wednesday, March 23rd. It's now 11:46, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good